confirming that we're recording. Okay, so the webinar is now recording. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce our guest. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Brian O'Neill. Brian is Professor Emeritus at Technological University Dublin. And I believe that previously there, Brian, you were head of the School of Media. And not only that, but Director of Research, Enterprise and Innovation at the university. Your area of expertise is media education, and I know you have a tremendous track record covering media literacy, internet governance, digital environmental policy, and so on, not to mention all your many advisory and policy roles and collaborations nationally and internationally. So it is a great pleasure to have you here. But specifically today, Brian, we've invited you to talk about digital voices. Digital voices was a major research project that you led with a team at TUD on behalf of the Ombudsman for Children's Office, who are partners in the COVISION project. And Digital Voices was about looking at how social and digital media can be mobilized to support children's right to be heard in the public policy making arena. So I think I've said enough, really. And again, welcoming all our participants and any more who join us later. And over to you, Brian, to start the discussion of digital voices.
Super. Thanks so much, Harry. Thank you indeed. Thanks everybody for joining. And Suja, I know, joining from the US. And indeed, for the recording of this project afterwards, thanks everybody for joining in this discussion. I'm delighted to be here and to share some of the ideas and the work we developed as part of the Digital Voices project with the Ombudsman for Children's Office, and particularly delighted given their participation as well in the COVISION project. And it's a real privilege. I'm really delighted to have very much a collegial discussion around the important issues of young people participating through whatever means available to them. And my particular area of interest is in the digital environment. Harry, as you've introduced me there, I just to contextualize, yes, I am from a media and communications background. That's my area of research and ongoing policy advocacy work and so on. And it's in that context that perhaps I'll narrate some of the issues and themes that emerge from this. So it was a particular privilege as well to work with the Office of the Ombudsman for Children, whose interest in developing this as an issue and as a theme within their work in advocating for children's rights was particularly important and valuable. Now, just to start off, I will share my screen. And Harry, maybe if you can just give me a thumbs up that everything is working as it should.
Oh, yeah,
perfect.
Yeah. Now we've got the full screen. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so I'll speak for about 30, 35 minutes or so, and very happy to open it up for discussion, because this is an ongoing project, as you would expect in this area. There's much to be worked through. There's much currently also in development in this ongoing issue, and our work as part of the OCO collaboration on digital voices was a particular snapshot in time and trying to capture the most important issues in terms of promoting this agenda. So what I'll talk about, and I've sort of organized around three key areas. First of all, really a bit of a reprise around the work that we did as part of the Digital Voices project, and that began in 2019 and was in fact launched in September of last year, but it extended into 2020. So therefore, some reflections in relation to work both pre and during COVID, which has some important bearing on the issues at hand. Secondly, I want to extend, from there, in terms of, the project itself finished last year, but it is an ongoing agenda. And some important issues to talk about in relation to that, and extending it into I suppose, the area where I feel most comfortable, which is in digital policy making. But I think it has application across the board, and something that we can talk further about in terms of implications for children's participation more generally. And finally, as I say, just to reflect on some of the conclusions for policy and for practice in what is a fast-moving topic itself. So that's the context, and I'll spend most of the time actually talking about the first two, and segue into a discussion for part three, if that's okay. So in terms of the actual the report itself, and I will share the link, of course, which is available on the website of the Ombudsman for Children's Office. And in terms of, if I could also just acknowledge my co-authors, Drs. Tweeding and Kevin Lauder, who worked with me, and we were very much a team and bringing different perspectives to bear in this particular work. As I mentioned, the report was actually launched last September, and that was the culmination of work that had extended over the period of major restrictions, certainly during the pandemic, and the period leading up to that, where we hosted quite a number of our workshops. We had quite a high-level launch. And we're delighted to have the participation of member of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, Philip Jaffe. We had Regina Jensdottir from the Council of Europe, Valeria Setti, Coordinator for the Rights of the Child at European Union level, Sonia Livingston and Pat Dolan from an academic perspective. So it was a particularly auspicious time to bring together the discussion around the interests and the importance of the digital environment for enabling and supporting children's participation. And yet it continues to evolve. And that's something that I wanted to reflect on today. But particularly noteworthy, in fact, was the publication last year of General Comment 25 on promoting children's rights in the digital environment, for which this is one crucial axis, and something that I think is a key support for further developing policy in this area. So that is the particular context, and that's what I'll be reporting from for the most part. But to say a little bit about the project itself, and why we set out in this particular context, and what was Digital Voices all about. Harry, I think you quoted just, if you like, the sort of the key question that we set ourselves, and what, or if you like, what was contained in our brief to examine how social and digital media could be mobilized appropriately and effectively to progress children's right to participate in public decision making. So a particular context here, and very much, of course, occasioned by the Ombudsman for Children's Office commitment to Article 12 of the UNCRC, and developing that as a key policy priority. So both in terms of advocating for children's rights here, and elaborating on the various different modalities of how that can be developed further, how it can inform practice, and so on. So for the purposes of the research, we wanted to engage on a number of different fronts. The general aspect of the overall project was to be applied in nature. In other words, that we were looking to try to impact on practice, to learn from practice, and also to advance practice thinking, as well as reflecting on some of the key academic issues in terms of research in this area, and where to focus further attention in terms of unlocking the potential within this. So for the purposes of that, we very much engage with the literature. We, as quite rightly emphasized by the OCO, prioritized engaging and consulting with young people as a core part of the research, and then a wider stakeholder consultation, because there are many different stakeholders involved in this space, and we were very much conscious that there was much to listen to and much to draw on from the wealth of stakeholder experience within this overall field. So to say a little bit about each of these, if I could, and to talk a little bit about, the academic context here. So you'll find in our report, a survey of the literature and the different branches of literature here, because I really want to call attention to the multidisciplinary nature of discussion in this field. And we certainly felt we were drawing on different strands, different lineages within focused discussion around children's participation, and trying to find ways in which this intersected. And of course, that part in the middle, working through applied social research and indeed sociology of childhood literature, looking at the literature from a more political science dimension in terms of civic participation and engagement, democratic processes and so on. And then, in my own field of media communication studies, rare did all three meet together. And as to be expected, there are some discussions that were had in common, but often they proceeded in parallel, and there really was insufficient merging of experience from there. So that's certainly something that we tried to engage with in the report, and did some reporting back in terms of what we felt were some of the key themes. We focused on a number of key concepts, and one of which is digital citizenship, which is again a focal point for a lot of discussion within education, and where and how the digital environment plays a role for young people's development, and how education can find or have a particular mission within that context. The literature will tell very clearly that these are concepts with great potential and often not great realization. So there was very much a lot of that. Within the media and communications environment, certainly there's a strong interest in terms of user engagement and the potential from children's and young people's experiences of use of different technologies that supported and certainly gave evidence towards their sense of engaging within wider civic, political, social, and public spaces, with some examples of effective participation, but certainly insufficient in terms of mainstreaming for the purpose of participation practice. But of course, with all of this, what the literature will show and highlight are the range of challenges and barriers that remain to address and to overcome in terms of successfully mobilizing. And that set up a lot of questions, of course, in terms of what we can take from the literature and try to focus in on a new area of focus, essentially, which is very specifically in terms of building opportunities for digital participation or realizing digital voices. So there was our discussion around the literature, and that on its own wasn't certainly going to get us very far in practice. So this is where the applied nature of our research, very much the heart of it was in terms of engaging with young people. So in terms of our work with young people as part of this initiative. It was set out from the very beginning that we wanted to have opportunities and to try to spread this as widely as possible in having a discussion with young people about how they felt the digital environment in its broadest sense could be mobilized for that purpose of having their voice heard, or for them to effectively participate and to realize some of these opportunities. So we did that in a number of different ways. Certainly we made every effort to reach out across the country in terms of diverse geographic, age, social context, different kinds of locations. This was through the part of planning pre-COVID. This was face-to-face. And there's a certain irony and tension in terms of how we developed this work, that we were very much engaging with people, with young people in face-to-face settings, in workshops and in focus groups, our two main methods. And using the opportunities to have both focused and more intensive participatory based discussions with them around thinking through and trying to use some creative methods of imagining new participative opportunities and spaces for them. So that was the particular way in which we did this, though some of the field work then happened, of course, after March 2020. So we moved it into the digital environment, and that certainly put it back to us in terms of overcoming the practical issues and challenges for ourselves. And we had some very interesting learnings indeed coming from that, where we tried to replicate some of the same type of participation methodology and the same quality of dialogue through Zoom as the main platform which we used. So those are just some of the parameters. But our general approach towards these discussions with young people was to go in and to begin from where they were in terms of engaging with them around their everyday experiences of using digital media technologies in their lives and all of the popular social media platforms that they would have access to, and working from there in terms of highlighting its positives, its negatives, and its opportunities. And that was really the question path that we developed. So within this, and certainly germane to the overall discussion in terms of all the caveats around when we talk about the great potential of the digital environment, we could never, and we would never be allowed to simply present this in an idealistic or rose-tinted fashion, because indeed, whenever we engage with young people in a variety of research contexts, there are always sobering accounts in relation to the realities that they have and what they encounter through their day-to-day use. So we didn't lead on any particular part of this, but we certainly collated and brought back evidence in many different ways in terms of the kinds of toxic environments that they sometimes faced, the problems in terms of unwanted contacts, which seem to be a persistent feature, and the nature of potentially harmful content that they were regularly coming across. Some of this is, part and parcel of young people's general experiences of discovery around, the wider environment with fewer controls and independent of adult supervision, but there were all areas of concerns raised by young people themselves around these. But of particular interest to us was the sense in which some of these factors inhibited their own confidence and their own use of technology to participate when opportunities afforded themselves to get involved or to participate in a group discussion or indeed to contribute to consultations. The fear of being singled out or the potential for bullying seemed to be ever present. So that was a salutary lesson for us in terms of necessary protections and whatnot. But we also had a lot of fun, it must be said, in our workshops and in our discussions with young people in terms of exploring imagine spaces. And we use this concept of, the brick wall of ideas, which were, in this case, physical posters, pasted up on the wall. And we got people to put up ideas of, what they would like to host if they had an opportunity to raise issues. Could they imagine this being done in a digital space and, through a digital environment, and, how that could be mobilized in some ways. So we were asking them about, topics that would interest them and motivate them to lead out or to join in a social movement, where that was a particular case. And I think, the Fridays of the Future were certainly topical at the time. And, climate action is something, that came up repeatedly in many of our discussions. And of course, is something that certainly enthuses young people as something that they are committed to and something they wanted to say a lot about. We also use that opportunity to ask them about what they could envisage as an actual digital participation space. So it's not just what they might talk about, but what that might look like. And that was the other dimension that came through as ideas. And these are, somewhat abstract ideas that would need to be designed and built. But it was the space for dialogue. It's not just for posting ideas and being listened to. In other words, that they can promote and put forward ideas, but they would also be listened to and engage in an actual dialogue. And that was the idea of a space which was dialogic, conversation-based, and would also have that dimension of an audience and an opportunity to engage in a discussion with decision makers. The Ombudsman for Children was often put forward, partly because I suppose we introduced ourselves as a project, in that context, and they thought, well, here would be a great way to have a regular dialogue through digital communication means with a person whose role it was to represent, to advocate, to champion young people's rights in this context. So, those were, exciting ideas to hear from young people and to listen to them in terms of how they felt this could be mobilized. Let me just say a little bit about the stakeholder consultation, which very much developed in parallel. And this was really a round of interviews with a wide range of stakeholders right across the sector in terms of professionals working in the field of both youth work or digital youth work in particular, as well as policymakers, government officials, some academic experts, various expert views who had experience to reflect on and could give us a candid view as to their ideas of potential within the digital space. And as we report, and you will see in the report, we got a mix of views, of course. Certainly, some passionate advocates and people who have developed expertise in using digital technologies in really quite effective ways with young people, and we're very passionate about how that could be developed. But at the same time, we spoke with many stakeholders who raised with us a lot of key questions around their concerns about the limitations and some of the challenges that this would afford. So this was, if you like, expression of an underlying ambivalence about the potential of making the digital environment a more hospitable space for young people's voices, and that informed our conclusions and indeed some of the recommendations that we made. And then the other concern was in terms of building on the extensive work that has taken place globally in terms of developing high quality practice in supporting children's participation, the extent to which that quality could be transposed or could be replicated within the digital environment. And I think a strong view that emerged was it wasn't a matter of actually replicating, it was in fact in terms of harnessing opportunities and perhaps developing complementary strategies. So there were some important insights there. So emerging from our work, and I'll just summarize this very, very briefly. And it's in the the final section of the report around the discussion and conclusion, whereby we developed a set of principles how we felt this would develop or support this mobilization of social and digital media. And in essence, what we were advocating was something of a blended approach, trying to take the best of both. And this was not specifically colored by our experiences of COVID, but in actual fact, trying to negotiate both the opportunities and challenges associated intrinsically with many digital products, platforms, and contexts. So there are a lot of ways in which we try to balance that, and also to think of it, as you can see here, in terms of modeling this in terms of a framework for participation, and of course engaging with the highly respected Lundy model, which captures the dimensions that participation really needs to satisfy to be appropriately rights-based, to fulfill certainly from the mandate set for us in terms of advancing Article 12 rights of participation in matters that affect young people, and ways in which that can be developed. That is really ongoing work. And in terms of developing the framework and translating some of those ideas into practical recipes for action. Where the Digital Voices report leads off is in terms of a call for action and the development of a program that would help to mobilize this and to turn a proof of concept into some practical realities. And I want to go on and just say a few words around some of the potential lines of direction, from this, because I think that's where some future potential may lie. But in summary, in relation to digital voices, we were positive at the end, as we were at the beginning, about the potential of both social and digital media, and we do need to attend to that particular distinction, about providing an appropriate space for young people, and that it had distinct advantages in terms of extending the nature of that actual space for participation, that it can be appropriately facilitated to allow the expression of young people's voices, and in terms of that key dimension, again, reaching populations, harder to reach children, and creating an opportunity for a wider dispersion in terms of opportunities to participate, we felt was quite important. In terms of audience and influence, this remains perennially, I think, key challenges in terms of ensuring that participation is effective, that it has a clear position within the policy-making process. But there's nothing within the digital environment that shouldn't and couldn't make that more effective collaborative, and indeed more interactive, given some of the qualities of technology that allow for feedback and allowed for easy engagement in that way. And so, these are advantages to build from. But that was to take it from a set of principles into the world of actual practice. So for the last part of what I'll talk about today, if I could say a few words around digital voices and the digital policy space. And so this is really, I suppose, taking it from the set of questions associated with how, and how digital methods can be used to enhance or complement participation, and to apply it as more specifically to a domain or a substantive issue in terms of actual digital policy. Now, I'm quite deliberately choosing that, because it's an area I'm active in myself, and something where I'm keenly watching in terms of the potential opportunities that there are to advance our actual practice here, and to see to what extent that may be extended to other areas. So I'm just going to choose 3 brief examples by way of illustration, and happy to discuss these further. And if I choose just take the first one, which is the whole debate that surrounded the setting of a digital age of consent in terms of data protection. Some audience members may groan when you come to look at this because it wasn't particularly the most satisfactory of processes, but that's actually precisely the reason why I wanted to choose this here. Under GDPR, Article 8 sets out the conditions by which children may consent, or the limitations as to the minimum age at which service providers can rely on children's consent to process their data. And this great and massive piece of European legislation left it to member states to determine or to set an age. It originally set the age at age 16, but gave member states the freedom to choose a lower age, somewhere between 13 and 16. And it led to quite a contested and sometimes confused debate as to what was entailed by this. And not surprisingly, because data protection law is notoriously complex, and GDPR itself was very new and posed lots of challenges for lots of people. But really, rather than go into the complexity of it and the many issues surrounding it, the key issue, and this is both in terms of the Irish experience, and there are many stakeholders involved, but replicated right across member states and at European level, was the absence of children's voices. And to put it bluntly, children were never consulted. They were not consulted in relation to the original provision itself, which was set with the best of intentions, but failed at any point thereafter to engage directly with young people around both their input, their perspectives, and the issues at play. So, the upshot was a whole suite of unintended consequences and an unsatisfactory situation, which has broadly, evolved since that time. It wasn't, there was no right answer, and there were no easy choices. It was a question of, where you set a balance between protection and participation rights. And that really was the question at play. But children's voices could have added hugely to this process. And that's children of any age. And that itself, merits a lot of discussion. But, following on from that, if I take the second example, which, if you like, is the follow-on, and to give all credit to the Irish Data Protection Commission, and indeed the work of the OCO in supporting a consultation exercise for data protection issues, and in particular in terms of developing its guidance, because that's what GDPR allows, the development of guidance by individual data protection authorities as to the application of data protection rules and policies regarding the processing of young people's data. That's what was involved. When you participate in the digital environment, you're in data-intensive environments, and it requires the appropriate rules and governance around rights as subjects, and rules governing the processing of data. So there was an extensive consultation process here, and 50 schools across the country were involved. Children as young as 17, or as 7 to 17, contributed their thoughts in terms of what it means for your data to be processed, questions around maturity of at when decisions can be made regarding data, and so on. So this has resulted in children contributed to a highly significant policy document, and now the applicable guidance around fundamentals impacting on the processing of children's data. So that was really a very valuable experience in terms of the participation in the actual policy making part. Again, this is all done in school contexts and in face-to-face situations, but it very much contributed directly to the policy impacting on the digital environment in really quite fundamental ways. And the third example I'm going to take, and I'll close off in this, is back to European policy making around this. And I'm choosing this now because there is so much happening. And I'm highlighting here in particular the so-called European Strategy for a Better Internet for Children, the BIC strategy, which dates back to 2012, so it's almost a decade old, but the revised strategy is due to be published within the coming weeks, so it really is quite imminent. And of course, it sits atop a whole range of different European measures and European legislative, regulatory and policy developments impacting on the digital environment, most of which have a specific provision affecting children. And this is the crucial part of it. So the Better Internet for Children strategy is a sort of a glue that stretches across all of that and knits together the various different ones. We've heard recently in the last 2 weeks, for example, agreement around the so-called Digital Services Act, which sets out particular provisions regarding obligations on the major tech platforms regarding their content, regarding their moderation requirements, and the obligations they have in terms of ensuring safety and removal of harmful content. So within that context, there was an extensive strategy again, and this is where it happened during the period of lockdowns and restrictions. So the only way children's voices could be heard in terms of what they wanted for a better internet for children was in fact through digital means. And again, I think there are some crucial lessons to be learned here because it was mobilized right across Europe. It had the support of a backbone structure, the Safer Internet Centres in each of the countries, but it certainly had the strength of support from the top. And the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has adopted 2022 as the European Year of Youth, and in her State of the Union address very much pledged to support young people's voices being heard at the center of policy making. So this is a particular key test of this, and I think particularly interesting, there is the Better Internet for Children strategy itself, which promises to set out key requirements and obligations around participation activities. And one measure of that that I think is certainly very promising and is certainly very appropriate to the context of the work of Digital Voices is that the Commission has fulfilled one of its promises around the creation of European Children's Participation Platform. And that has been tendered, it has been commissioned, and is to be made available towards the end of this year. And that is a platform by which children and young people will have an opportunity to participate in the policy process at European level and individually within member states. And the infrastructure is to build on top of that. It will very much rely on the enthusiasm, I think, of the relevant departments, structures and agencies to get involved. But the intention is that there would be a digital participation platform to build on these concepts and these promises that young people would be better supported to have their voices heard. But it would certainly be a fitting accompaniment to this idea of the Better Internet for Children strategy. So my conclusion, I'll just wrap it up here, if I could, in terms of just some takeaway points around this. As we signaled in terms of the report for the Ombudsman for Children, and acknowledging the significant work of advocacy which the OCO and indeed Ombudsman's offices across Europe are leading, the whole question around engaging and participating in the digital environment is a long-term game, and it is something that is taking shape. Crucial building blocks are being put in place, but a key argument that we're making is that it is fundamental to realizing children's rights, and it certainly is very hard to think of how they would not be given the way in which all of our environments have been transformed by digital technology. The challenges certainly remain in terms of digital methods and modes of participation. They are, for the most part, design-related challenges. And again, key measures are in development in terms of addressing design standards. And I think that's one of the crucial areas in which there needs to be much further debate, more direct dialogue with industry, greater pressure applied in terms of appropriate design strategies that are rights respecting, that fulfill requirements of participation and respond to everything that we heard from young people about the problems that they encounter. One thing I would say is that the issue becomes ever more pressing because technology never stands still. And just in terms of, I think the recent moves in relation to Twitter being seen as the public square or the digital commons, moving in very much privatized ways and quite opaque to public inspection, has given everybody cause for concern. And I think is one of those ways in which we see these as really very pressing issues, and all the more important in terms of building democratic openness in terms of participation opportunities. But finally, as I say, certainly European Union policies are very much focused on building a future fit for the digital age, and that was the context of Europe, fit for the digital age, supporting youth interests within within this space, and ensuring that participation remains core to that. Okay, I'll stop there, and as I say, I'm sharing the link in terms of the actual Digital Voices report. My contact details are there, and very happy to have further discussion around this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor O'Neill. That actually was a brilliant presentation, in my view. And I'd like to say to everybody, the full report is definitely worth a read, but you can't beat getting the essence, the synthesis, direct from the author. So again, thank you very much. And we have got some questions. Because we're a small group, I would propose to promote all attendees to panelists so that you have the option of asking your own question, if that's all right. Obviously, this will allow you to talk and to be seen if you want, but you still have the option to keep your camera off. So I'm gonna, oh, it's happening. There we go. Yep. Right, so wonderful to have you all on the panel. Thank you. So we have some questions, and I've got one of my own if we run out. And the first one here is from Edwina. Edwina, would you like to switch your mic on and your camera if you wish and ask your own question?
Yep, can you hear me?
We can indeed.
So my question, first of all, thank you, Professor O'Neill, for a great presentation, raising so many issues, and it's shocking here, as we're all aware, that children's voices aren't included in the debate. So my question is that within your research and your project, did you see or hear of any gaps from the children about their education and the digital environment? And did they ask for a link using their voice digitally in relation to education and policy? Do they see, a bridging that?
Thanks, Edwina. Yes, absolutely. I suppose I should say that digital skills and digital literacy was not something we were specifically looking at or needed to. It wasn't actually the focus. In other words, how well equipped were children, to harness digital tools. It was more a question of exploring the concept, the disposition, and the ability of once afforded the opportunity. But I think what was very apparent, and we spoke with children from age 8 to 17. So primary school and in secondary schools. So we had lots of opportunities to talk to them about what they did, what they engaged with, form impressions around their abilities. And like any type of engagement, one can always be impressed that young people are certainly immersed in, very conversant, have a great facility with, and yet at the same time spot all the kinds of gaps in terms of sometimes superficial type uses and what around harnessing creative applications, and something we call attention to in terms of in the literature review as well, particularly focusing around questions of civic engagement, that there is a certain type of ladder of opportunities, a hierarchy of digital skills, and it is always a stepped approach. Most will have all the basic skills and use digital tools very intensively, but perhaps in not a particular deep way. Some will advance their skills and so on. It certainly is a key issue that arises in terms of the actual appropriate needs of training and support, because that is required across the board. For any kind of new digital space and new digital environment, there are functionalities and there are skills that need to be developed. We got great access and support from schools, and that's because there are often great digital champions within schools who are very keen to promote and support children and young people in this way. And they're actually crucial in terms of fostering an appropriate environment. One of our recommendations was, in fact, that schools were great spaces within which to develop democratic structures around digital technology. Why not have an actual link? And that's really the answer to your second question in terms of how everyone in a school community could participate in a process using an SMS link or some tool by making their voice heard in that way. But that's the general context to say around digital literacy and skills. We weren't specifically focusing on, but it's always apparent that there's a great diversity. There are always skills needs. And I think, certainly in terms of the evolving digital environment, we always have to ensure that there's, proper support in terms of, digital skills reinforcement and training of trainers.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have some more questions now from anonymous attendee. There's two in the Q&A box. I think we can ask them together. An anonymous attendee, if you're with us and would like to come on board and comment, please do. But in the meantime, I'll put the questions to Brian. So from anonymous attendee, we have first of all great session. So there we go, which I agree. How did you recruit the children and young people? And then the second part, what methods did you use to engage with children?
Okay,
so,
very good. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I made the point that we attempted to reach out far and wide, and partly our objective here was try to talk to young people not with the participation hat on, and so therefore we were trying to avoid let's say those who were well practiced in terms of being a youth representative, a school council member, or indeed a member of Corla or whatnot. We engaged separately in terms of stakeholder groups there to get those all important perspectives. So this was at least an effort to reach out to people not selected on that basis. And there is a discussion in the report in terms of our sampling methodology. We chose areas for the purposes of our workshops, and we chose 4 geographically dispersed workshops, which broadly turned out to be north, south, east, and west, but we chose them from the electoral register in terms of highest density of youth population, and selected a school from within that particular electoral district, and within the school, well, then we engaged in discussion with our access points, the principals, and the teachers who were able to support us. So many of the children, the workshops were transition year age. For our other focus groups, and we had a range of categories, we're trying to reach out across different groupings to cover both age, mixed gender, and a number of hard to reach or seldom heard groups. And again, you'll see that we constructed a range of focus groups around these areas. So geographically dispersed again, and within that context, obviously within each individual area, we had to engage with some of our stakeholders to recruit participants. But we were impressed, and there are overall about 200 young people who contributed one way or another to those participation activities. And we got quite a diverse range of methods. In terms of methods used to engage with children in terms of the focus groups, which typically were between 6 to 9 children, usually in school settings or other group settings, depending on how the group was actually hosted. The majority, I think in the end, about 70% of our work was face-to-face, 30% then was online, and we were moved into that position. Focus groups were interactive discussions within that small group setting. Workshops were based around a range of participation methods, typically half-day in direction. So you can see some of the artifacts and the materials within the report around how we used creative methods, because that was the idea: brainstorming and trying to think about these imagined spaces, not the existing digital world, but what an ideal digital environment might look like.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, this is your chance. I have no more questions submitted, but if anybody would like to unmute, this is your chance to put your question or even your comment or feedback or insight. I see Martina there.
Hi, sorry, brilliant session, like so good. Thank you all for putting it together. It's brilliant. And a little bit close to my heart with my PhD at the moment, because I'm hoping to engage schools myself. I was just wondering, did you have any issues carrying out the workshops in the schools? As in, were they okay with you doing it during term time, or did they ask you to do it later in the summer? I know you mentioned transition year groups there. Was it kind of easier with them?
Yes. Now, of course, I think many people working with young people will find this. Transition year students also get called upon quite a lot. They weren't all exclusively transition year kids, but it was a very good starting point, because they had somewhat more freedom. And I think when you go to a school principal, exam years will be out of question for the most part. But in actual fact, once we host a workshop, it's a positive opportunity. We got very positive responses from schools. We selected schools, as I say, we had a sampling methodology to choose the area, and we were looking for a school which was not all mixed gender. Two weren't in actual fact, but overall, we certainly were trying to have mixed gender participation. But schools were very happy to support us, and we were in the middle of term time, and we were taking a half day, so it was either a morning or an afternoon. But I think we had the support of the Ombudsman for Children, and that certainly helped. Having a calling card, always helps within this. And I think, we carefully prepared the way in terms of explaining what we were trying to do. We worked with a well-established youth participation expert, who helped us facilitate the workshops. We talked about the methods. So, then it's just logistics, ensuring that we had a nice quiet room within the school, and set it up, and move the furniture around and do all the usual things, so that we could have an enjoyable and fun afternoon or morning. And that's exactly what we had. So we'd no particular problems. It was just the preparation, the planning, and explaining very carefully in advance. Yes, schools are often over-consulted, and one has to be careful of that. But in fact, maybe it's because we went to far-flung reaches of the country, that they hadn't actually been consulted that often, and that was in our favor as well.
Okay, amazingly, we are bang on time. So unless anybody puts their hand up to squeeze in a last quick question, I think I'm going to wrap up here. So first of all, thank you very much, Professor O'Neill. That really was an excellent session, and thank you everybody for coming along and for joining in. This will be on our website, so Professor O'Neill's insights will be available to a much larger population in due course. Our next webinar is going to be in June, and we're setting up a discussion around hearing children and young people's voices in policy making, and we have some policy people coming along. I don't know if we have any firm details yet. Do we, Helen, have any firm details to share, or should we just leave it at that and keep an eye on our website, and the full details will be up very, very soon?
It'll be the last week of June, so just keep an eye out.
Right.
I do have details, but I'll not share them just yet.
Right. So for the next webinar, keep your eye on our website, and also on Twitter, because which was mentioned earlier on. We always promote things on Twitter. So that's the next one coming up. And I think that's it. Suja, have you any final, do you want to say anything before we go? From a message from the United States?
I really wanted to say thank you, everyone, especially Professor Brian O'Neill, for taking your time. And, you know, because that topic is very close and very timely for our own project in terms of digital voice. And you just articulate in a beautiful way, and you know, it's such a wonderful project. And already we tweeted about the report, and everything is available. Again, that collaboration is very key, as he said, you know, working with the Ombudsman for Children's Office, working yourself and other European member states, and looking at the children voice as a whole. So I really wanted to say thank you again, and taking your time, and thank you all the attendees. This is from the COVISION team. We look forward to seeing you in end of June. And thank you very much, and hello from the US. Thank you.
Okay, so goodbye, everybody. I'm going to stop recording, and I will say goodbye to everybody and draw this webinar to a close.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.